Time for a pop quiz. Question number 1. From the Old Testament scriptures, who is singled out as having been the meekest man alive on the earth? Go ahead and pause the video if you need time to think about this. Okay, are you ready? If you've answered Moses, you're right, and you can check out Numbers 12 verse 3 for the proof text on this. Question number 2. What was Moses' greatest failure as a leader? Specifically, what did Moses do that God forbade him from taking the Israelites into the promised land? Go ahead and pause the video again and give yourself some time on this question. Okay, are you back? Now, many times the response I get to this second question is roughly something like this. Moses got angry and struck the rock rather than speaking to it. Wrong. Well, it's at least not what the Bible expressly states. This passage is taken from Numbers chapter 20 and is often referred to as the waters of Meribah. The word Meribah is sometimes translated as arguing, contention, or strife. Now, I've cited this account in my previous episode where I was talking about the quarreling of the people, but in this episode we're shifting our focus to Moses and how he responded to the people. Let's pick up the story directly after the quarrel and see how this worked out. So Moses and Aaron went from the presence of the congregation to the door of the tabernacle of testimony and fell on their faces. Then the glory of the Lord appeared to them. The Lord then spoke to Moses, saying, "Take the rod, and you and your brother Aaron gather the congregation together. Speak to the rock before them, and it will give its waters. Thus you shall bring them water out of the rock, and give drink to the congregation and their cattle." Now let's pause here long enough to notice that despite the people's angry and contemptuous words preceding this passage, God's response here was very kind. Just gather the people together, speak to the rock, and I'll give everyone water. There's no spite, there's no vengeance, there's no scolding the people for being so rebellious. Okay, let's continue. So Moses took the rod from before the Lord as the Lord ordered him. Then Moses and Aaron gathered the congregation together before the rock, and he said to them, "Hear me, you disobedient ones. Must we bring water for you out of this rock?" Moses then lifted his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod, and water came out abundantly, and the congregation and their cattle drank. But the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, "Because you did not believe me to sanctify me before the children of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this congregation into the land I am giving them." This was the water of contention, because the children of Israel scoffed before the Lord, and he was sanctified among them. Now, to be clear, I do agree that Moses failed by giving vent to his anger. And I also believe that Moses failed through his disobedience. But did you catch it? That neither his anger nor his disobedience was cited when God rebuked Moses. Rather, God said this, "Because you did not believe me." The problem stemmed from a lack of faith in God. And the outcome of this unbelief was that he did not sanctify God in the eyes of the children of Israel. And yes, his anger and his disobedience factored into that. Moses' greatest failure was that through his own unbelief, he mischaracterized God to the people. Moses made God look bad, and God cares deeply about that. To me, this is a sobering realization. We who bear the name of God are responsible to demonstrate what God is really like. To fail in this is to bring reproach on the name of God. So let's try to bring this home to us. When we're confronted by people who accuse God of being evil, or maybe they accuse us of being evil, what is our response? Does it make us angry? Do we start calling out condemnations like Moses did when he said, "Hear me, you disobedient ones"? Do we get offended or become defensive? Like Moses when he said, "Must we bring water for you out of this rock?" Do we abuse our spiritual authority, as Moses did by striking the rock? Do we become impatient? Do we begin to ridicule or intimidate others? Like, what does our faith in God do? We ought not to view the antagonists around us as being our greatest threat. A much greater threat is our own unbelief in the absolute goodness of God. The result of unbelief will always be sin, whether it's anger, disobedience, or something else. And at least one result of our sin is that we're going to give the world an occasion to blaspheme the name of God. Would it not be appropriate for Christians to take responsibility for the world's evil perspective of God? I think it is. And the primary task here is not to try to convince the world by fighting back and arguing with them, but rather to restore our own faith in the complete goodness of God. Such goodness, in fact, that our own lives become transformed into the likeness of Christ, and then to allow God to be vindicated through our own demonstration of the love and meekness of Christ. Just like the Apostle Paul said to Timothy, "The Lord's servant must not be quarrelsome, but kind to everyone, able to teach, patiently enduring evil, correcting his opponents with gentleness." And that's a word for meekness in some translations. God may perhaps grant them repentance, leading to a knowledge of the truth. And similarly, the Apostle James says this, "Who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom." The world is desperately in want of hope, and by the meekness of Christ, we can give an answer when people ask us the reason for our hope, if we have sanctified God in our hearts. Now, perhaps you're overwhelmed by all of this. Maybe, like myself, you look back over your life and you see your past littered with arguing and contention and strife. Take courage. It's not too late to restore our faith in the goodness of God, so that He is sanctified in the eyes of the people we relate to. Or maybe you're thinking this, "Well, I'm not Moses. If he failed, how am I expected to make it?" And yes, that's correct. None of us, even if you're responsible for shepherding a church, none of us has the position of Moses before the people. Moses was the foreshadow of Christ, and Christ is our hope, and He is our perfect example. And for the past 2,000 years, it is Jesus Christ, the new Moses, who is the meekest man, still alive. And we have hope because He who has called us to be His disciples with the words, "Follow me," has also given this most compelling invitation. "Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls." God bless you.